Are you sending it as a binary signal or a multi-level signal? Okay. How much energy you are consuming? What's the noise immunity? How much noise margins you are getting? Having a larger noise margin, how much noise immunity you are getting? So we are looking at all these aspects. Plus there is a different way of sending: bipolar, unipolar, bidirectional, unidirectional, differential. These are different ways of sending or encoding the signal. Each one has its own benefits. Okay, but then each one has its own drawbacks also. Okay, so let us continue because we have already started discussing. So before I come to the wires or the interconnections, I am going to finish up with the physical quantity discussion and then the signal encoding. Okay, as I said, the main book that I would be referring to is the Dallis and Colton's book. A part of it is also given in the Rabe's book. So as I said that when you look at compare the two different ways of doing the same task, it's better we start with an example, the same example which is given in the book. I have taken it as it is without any change. And here we have seen that CMOS, voltage CMOS is very mode of transmitting the data. It's very easy to implement and is highly compatible with the way you design your CMOS circuits. Okay, whereas in the case of a low voltage current mode signaling, we get a better energy consumption and we get a better, you can say the noise immunity also is better. And the swing is also a very small. Noise immunity is also very, very proper. And delta V that you require, the signal swing that you require, where it is large in the case of a voltage mode CMOS, whereas in the case of current mode, it is a very small, of the order of only 92 millivolts, with the typical performance parameters that we usually get for the transmission mode as chosen accordingly, whether voltage mode or current mode. So typical values that we get. So now, as continuing in the same direction, this is the last slide we were looking at, that if you go for a binary encoding where you have a single detection threshold, the switching threshold along which you measure whether the signal is low or high. Detection threshold is nothing but a switching threshold, low and high. Okay, so there it seems that roughly, ideally, my total noise margin will be half the signal swing, and signal swing is from VOL to VH. Signal swing is from VOL to, so roughly half the signal swing is going to be a noise margin, but that does not translate into a greater noise immunity. So first thing with this binary encoding, with this calculation, what we try to show is that the swing that you require to reliably detect your signal in the presence of a noise is two components. One component which is independent of the signal swing, another component which is dependent on signal swing. As a result, the total noise, we are representing it as a noise independent component and a noise dependent component, where Kn is a coefficient which is corresponding to the term where Kn is proportional to delta V, proportionality constant. Okay, and here with small exercise we came to know that required swing over here comes out to be roughly of the order of 5.6 volts for voltage CMOS signaling. It is very small in the case of a low voltage CMOS signaling. It's only 92 millivolts. In the presence of noise, you only have to have a delta V difference signal swing requirement of only 92 millivolts. Where are other people? Swati is missing. Huh? Cyprus. Okay, there's a company there. Okay, now I want all of you to give me your attendance regularly. Shweta, I make you in charge. So every day you get the sheets from me, and then every day the sheet has to be circulated and you have to sign on that sheet. We'll be maintaining that data from next class onwards. Please get the attendance sheet from my office. Okay. So can you see that the difference that you require is only 92 millivolts? If the signal has a 92 millivolts apart, I can say this is a 0 level, that's a 1 level. Okay, and at the same time, because your swing is also less, approximately of the order of only 165 millivolt. Milliamperes. 133 milliampere minus 133 milliampere. So signal string is also very, very small. So energy expansion per bit is also very less. Okay. So when we come to delay, delay is actually we should not, it's just an introduction over here because delay actually needs some calculation. So when you look at the delay, you're transmitting a bit information. Actually, you are looking at the transmitter delay, the receiver delay, and the wire delay. Wire delay, I'm saying because it would be behaving like a transmission line. That is why it is written as a transmission line. Okay, so how do you model your wire? It's a lumped C or lumped RC or it's a RLC, distributed RLC. Depending on that modeling, we will be calculating our delay component. Okay, so here, if it is a current, what you are injecting is a current signal. If it is a voltage mode, what you are injecting is a voltage signal. So voltage signal in the case of, like it's a, in the case of the voltage mode CMOS, the total swing that you would be transmitting is from 0 to 3.3 volt, whereas for the case of a current mode signaling, it's only 133 milliampere flowing through a 50 ohms characteristic impedance that nearly gives you a total swing of 330 millivolts. So as the signal travels through the wire, there is an energy gets expended, energy is lost. So we are also concerned with that, not only the delay, we will also be looking at the energy consumption part. But here for our system, what we have chosen, that we want to finish the total transmission within 6 nanoseconds. So now we come to signal, as we were discussing, whether you are going for a 2-level or a multi-level. Expressions we can easily find out for every level. First V0 bit, this range which is considered as a low-level signal and a high-level signal if there is a single detection threshold. 2 bits only, 1 detection threshold. 3 bits, there would be 2 detection thresholds. 3 bits, 4 bits, number of detection thresholds will be always be 1 less, and you can find the expressions very easily by using these formulas. You can find the values. Okay. Now remember here, when we look at the energy number of levels also decide how much energy will be consumed. So how many signal bits you have within that range from V low to V high. I have the total voltage range is fixed. I may divide it into 3 parts, so it's a ternary signaling. I may divide it into 4 parts, it would be quaternary, or it can be binary, or it can be any multi-level signaling that you are aiming at. Okay, but remember that the range is fixed from V low to V high. The range is fixed. So what is changing is actually the expansion, the range that represents one signal, one single bit. 1 bit means 0 bit. For a ternary, it would be 0 bit, 1 bit and 2 bit. In binary, you have only 2 bits, 0 and 1. In ternary, you have 3 bits, 0, 1 and 2. In quaternary, you will have 3 bit representations. So accordingly, what the range that you get, that goes on reducing because the total energy remains constant. Range remains constant from V low to V high. Okay, so we can write the expressions as over here. Okay, energy that you require, switching energy that you require to get consumed whenever there is a transmission of data, and that has to be greater than a certain limit, which is decided by the noise component. Which is decided by the, here we are not looking into it, into the signal dependent components. It is only coming from the noise independent component. Certainly the value will have be more if you add a signal dependent component also. But since if you keep the signal low, that component would be smaller. If the delta V is low, that signal dependent, range dependent component would be smaller. So at least minimal value comes from the noise independent. So your signal energy should be at least more than the noise energy, so that you can have a good signal to noise ratio. You have a good signal to noise ratio, and here you can see that depending on number of levels you have, N decides the number of levels. Okay, here the signal energy goes on reducing. So this is per bit. This is per bit. This is total switching energy. This is the total switching energy that you require when the total range from V low to V high is used. Whereas per bit if you take, it's a smaller range. Per bit if you take, it's a smaller range. So as n goes on increasing, the range goes on smaller and smaller. The range goes on smaller and smaller. So energy, switching energy per bit goes on reducing. Got it? The switching energy per bit goes on reducing. So if we have the signal energy, and this is the number of levels we have on this side. Okay, so signal energy, it goes on increasing as, I think it should be other way around, doesn't matter. Okay, the signal energy goes on increase. I feel it's the wrong way, no? Okay, I will look at it. I think there's a, either it should be number of bits and here it should be energy. I will cross check it once again. Kindly do not get confused over here. So that is very simple. That if you have n more, the per bit goes on down. What remains constant is the total. Because your range is constant. Can you see? If it is the total range you are considering, that is ultimately getting saturated. Per bit it is increasing. Per bit is increasing. Can you see? But if you look at the total energy, where you have the entire ranges from VL to V high, that will ultimately saturate, because you cannot have a delta V more than V low to V high. That range is fixed. So I will be discussing these two slides once again, these two graphs once again. And we know for binary signaling, energy requirement is minimal. Energy requirement is minimal possible. Okay. Now, multi-level signaling, how to have a higher data rate? How do you transmit a data? Okay, you have to transmit a logic 0, it can be pulse signaling. So when you send a pulse, that means if the pulse is present, signal is 1. If it is a binary encoding, if pulse is absent, you can take it as a say data 0. Okay, I can very easily say I can define a pulse. I'm sending my data in the form of a pulse. But this is not the only way. I can also define it in a bipolar way. It's again a pulse signaling, but is represented in a bipolar. How can you go for a bipolar? You can have a plus and minus, positive and the negative pulse. You can have positive as well as a negative pulse. Bipolar. This is known as a bipolar. That is, we have a positive pulse, data is 1. If you have a negative pulse, data is 0. Unipolar, when you have only positive pulse. So whenever there is no positive pulse, automatically the data is 0. So various ways in which you send your information. But if it is not pulse, you are not going for a pulse. What you should have is actually we have to look for, maybe I am sending it like that, using a sine wave. So this is more, we are moving into little bit into the communication areas. How do you send information? So it can be a sine wave. Now, bandwidth is always at premium. You are not having a very larger bandwidth available to you. Within that smaller bandwidth, we have to transmit more number of bits. Within the same bandwidth, we do not have a larger bandwidth available to me, so that I can say, okay, this frequency, this bit, this frequency, this bit, no. We do not have. So what we say is that we go for modulation techniques. So we say, okay, if it's a binary, let me go for amplitude modulation. Let me go for phase modulation. Let me go for frequency modulation, or let me go for a combination of these two or these three. Okay, so here, you all know, how do you have an amplitude modulation? So whenever amplitude suddenly increases, it is a data high. Whenever it is a less, the amplitude is modulating in the same frequency. Frequency we are not changing. We are not changing the frequency. It's a binary. You are sending a binary data through the use of a sinusoid. By using a sinusoid, binary data is transmitted. So whenever amplitude is more, the receiver senses it and assumes a data 1 is coming. Okay, similarly, in the phase, when you change the phase, so whenever you have the phase has, can you see this is 180 degree? Suddenly the pulse has changed to phase of 180 degree. So it's a sine theta, it would be a positive data, and it's a sine of, it's a 1 degree apart, it would be a negative data. So you are changing the phase. Again, you are not changing the frequency. Can you see I am not using bandwidth? I am keeping my signal at the same frequency. We are not using two different frequencies to say, okay, at this frequency data bit is 1, at this frequency data bit is 0. We are not saying that. So we are keeping the frequency same. We are using the methods of modulation. Amplitude modulation, this is a phase modulation, and this is a frequency modulation to transmit a binary signal. So larger frequency increases, data bit is high. Frequency decreases, data bit is 0, or vice versa. Okay, but in that case, suppose it's a binary. If you go for multi-level, I will have 3 different amplitudes here. Say ternary, I will have 3 different phases over here, maybe 120 degree apart, within 360 degree, 3 divisions I have to make, and here you have to have 3 frequencies. Okay, so we always want to use minimum bandwidth. So we have to now think of ways in which multiple bits can be sent with a minimum bandwidth requirement. So here is, you can combine the amplitude and phase together. Find out a method in which you combine the modulation using phase as well as the amplitude, and that is a very popular technique which gives you 16 different combinations in the same frequency, at the same frequency. 16 different bits you can send. This is called as a quadrature amplitude modulation, where you modulate the phase along with amplitude. But actually, you are only having 2 different amplitudes, you are only having 2 different phases. I am not having 16 different amplitudes and 16 different phases. No. Creating 16 different amplitudes is a challenge for me. Creating 16 different phases is a challenge for me for the same sinusoid. So actually we are only manipulating 2 different amplitudes and 2 different phases, and we are able to get a constellation where the total bits we can generate out of these 2 manipulations possible is 16 bits. So just by manipulating with these 2 amplitudes and 2 phases, we are able to send 16 different bits in the same frequency range. So if you are really going for a multi-valued signaling, this kind of approach is a beneficial approach. Discussion is how to implement it. Discussion is more into communication. But yes, you can design a circuitry which can lead to, can you see, each bit is different. Each bit is different. So this is having only, can you see, on this scale only 2 different bits, low and high. On this scale only 2 different, this and this. So every quantity is changed only twice, but then you are able to generate 16 different levels. Very, very beneficial from the point of view of transmitting or going for the multi-valued signaling approach. So now, how do we understand the noise immunity? How do we understand? Delta V we have come to know. Signal range that you require. And we have seen that voltage mode, CMOS voltage mode requires a larger swing in the presence of noise, and current mode requires a very small swing. But then how to understand noise immunity? How to understand noise margins? So we start with our noise margins. In our VLSI design, how do we understand noise margins? It's the noise margin low and noise margin for high level signal. So how do we understand a noise margin for a high level signal? It is a VOH minus VIH. That is the lowest voltage which can be treated as a logic 1. Similarly, I have a noise margin for low level signal. So this definition is VOH minus VIH, and this definition is VIL minus VOL. But this we did where we assume that transmitter and receiver are ideal in nature. They are ideal. Whereas you do get sensitivities. Even the transmitter is not an ideal and receiver is not an ideal. Receiver may be a differential pair. There may be an offset. You may have an input offset over there. Similarly, transmitter may also have an offset. It may also have a variation possibility because of process variations. Sensitivity might be there. So you can have this VOL may be shifting up and down, VOH may be shifting, or VIH may be shifting up and down. As a result, the true noise margin should be found out by including these parameters. So if I have my normal VTC, this is actually not an inverse VTC. And you see, what does it mean? It is a kind of that means there is no inversion happening. If you invert it, you will get a not gate or static CMOS implementation VTC, which is always inverting in nature. You all know that. So whatever it may be doesn't change your definitions. Whether you have an inverting VTC or non-inverting, it doesn't change your definition. Okay. So we say, okay, this is my VOL somewhere here. I have VOH somewhere here, and I have the switching threshold somewhere here. Detection threshold is somewhere here. And since there is a sensitivity is involved, there's an input offset, the value is not a one value, it's a range. It keeps on shifting, it is a range. So my VOL may be shifting. This value may be nominal, it may be slightly up or it may be slightly down. Similarly, VOH may not be, the nominal value may be slightly up and may be slightly down. So this, can you see, it's a practical VTC. So if your VOH is changing, highest it can be this value, lowest it can be this value. So this, in between this will be somewhere where my nominal value lies. Similarly here for VOL. And then if this is my switching threshold line, detection threshold, which roughly I take at the half of the signal swing, even there can also be a range. Okay, so I may have this entire span is a possible region in which detection threshold may lie. Okay, so so what will be this span? Naturally, it would be receiver sensitivity plus receiver offset. So receiver offset towards the positive side, receiver offset towards the negative side. So overall span will have whatever sensitivity you have plus 2 VR. That's how you are getting a 2. Got it? Because nominal may be positive because offset can be plus minus. So nominal plus or nominal minus. Okay. Similarly here you may have a transmitter offset coming into picture. So as a result, if you include all these values into it, my new expressions for noise margin high and noise margin low is by including the T0, R0 and RS. This is the actual values that you should be having. Now if this is my noise margin, how are defined, then what is the noise immunity? How do you understand by noise immunity? Where is my slide? For noise immunity. Yes, this is the noise. How do you define noise immunity? It is actually the ratio of, it's a signal to noise ratio. Noise immunity is actually nothing but the signal to noise ratio. So what's the total signal span you have? So that is the ratio of margin that you have. How much margin you have for binary? It is delta V by 2. So multiple valued it would be delta V subternary delta V by 3. Quaternary delta V by 4. So what is the maximum? Even though we start with the ideal value, actually it would be less than that. So total single swing that you have, it's a delta V by 2 or 3 or 4, divide by the noise. Divide by signal to noise. Higher is this value, better is the noise immunity. And I can understand noise immunity by looking at the noise budget. Again, a component, a summation of noise independent component and noise signal delta V dependent component. Okay. So ratio of Vm to Vn, and Vm is the noise margin that you have. So delta Vm upon Vn, so when you take this ratio, so Vm by Vn we have to compute. And I represent my noise immunity in terms of the coefficient Kmn. Kmn. So Vm by Vn, now you have to use these values, these expressions. You have to use these expressions and then try to simplify the expression. It comes out to be delta V more than this. Requirement for delta V, signal swing, and what should be the condition on Kmn? Because delta V has to be positive. You cannot have a negative swing. Range has to be positive. That means the KNM has to be more than, it has to be less than. You cannot have this term more than 1. You cannot have this term more than 1. So KMN has to be less than 1 by 2 KN. So signal to noise ratio coefficient K must be less than 1 by 2 Kn. What is Kn? The noise coefficient. Which noise coefficient? Which component? The component which is dependent on the signals. So you should have the signal to noise ratio component more than at least this value. That too, when we are assuming that my signal range is delta V by 2, you may change it for any other ranges, delta V by 3 or delta V by 4. So as we see that it seems that if you have a delta V noise margin more, binary will give you a better noise immunity. It seems, but this is not all, because there is a denominator coming into picture. There is a denominator, delta V is also coming into picture. So it is not directly proportional to only delta V. If this component is dominating, then even if you have a better noise margin, you will not get a better noise immunity. You will not. If the denominator is going to be dominating. So a bigger noise margin does not guarantee a larger noise immunity. We have to actually look at the noise immunity separately defined as, in a simple words, signal to noise ratio. Okay? The period is over? No. So once we have discussed this, so as I said, I think there are other ways in which you send the data. I hope you all are aware of these things. I am not much. Hamming codes, error correcting codes. So you have a Reed-Solomon, you have a Hamming where we add extra check bits, so that even if there is a noise present, the data transmission is perfect. Again, this goes more into the communication area. Maybe somebody interested, he may start reading on his own. So where you add extra check bits to ensure that in the presence of a noise, the data transmission is not getting affected. This is pulse signaling, we have already discussed. Bidirectional, yes, if you want to really reduce on your pin count. I do not have a dedicated input pin and a dedicated output pin, because a pin out means a cost involved. A pin out is a cost involved, a higher cost. So if you want to really reduce the number of pins, I want to use a single pin as input as well as output. So here you require a bidirectional signaling. That means same wire you are using for sending the data in as well as for taking the data from outside. Bidirectional. So effective wire density and pin count gets drastically reduced if you go for bidirectional signaling. Again, one way of transmitting the data. Same wire is being used. Same wire. Naturally, this has an impact on the transmitter and receiver designs, because they should be bidirectional in nature. The designs, they have to be redone. They have to be bidirectional in nature. And then differential signaling, very, very important from the point of view of noise immunity. Differential, but it increases what? It increases because every input will be differentially going. So 2 wires for sending 1 bit data. 2 wires for sending 1 bit data. So naturally the wire density increases. What gets better is the noise immunity, because a common portion gets eliminated. Common mode signal gets eliminated. And common mode signal, usually noise comes under common mode category. The noise comes under the common mode category. That gets eliminated. But yes, it is more expensive, it is more hardware consuming. It is more hardware consuming. So more pins are required, more wires are required, but noise benefit is obtained. So now once we have discussed the signal encoding part, now we come to the wire part. So once you know a little bit about how to encode signals, how to understand what encoding is better. Little bit more detail is given in the book, which I have not included in my slides. You may discuss. He has gone very elaborately into the signal encoding itself. So in further class, I have limited my discussion to this much only. So now we come to understanding the wires. That is, now the wire is started. I have not discussed the transmitter receiver design. I will come to it if I find time. At least one design I will discuss. How to design a transmitter and how to design a receiver for a given condition, for a given specification. Okay? For the time being, we are assuming that both transmitter and receiver, they are nothing but CMOS inverters. Or at the most, they would be differential pairs. It's very easy to understand, assuming that there is something at the receiving point, there is something at the transmitting. So for simplicity, we are assuming them either as a differential pair amplifier or as a simple NOT gate, which is again an amplifier in the form of a common source amplifier. Okay. So now, if you come to the wire part, so wires till date, till before 250 nanometer, they were treated like a equipotential regions. That is, there is no distribution of voltage across the length of the wire. There is no voltage drop across the length of the wire. That means different portions of the wire are not at different potentials. Every wire is having equal potential at every point. That is, it does not sustain any voltage drop across it. We were assuming that resistance is so low, negligible, that it is not sustaining any voltage across it. It's called as the equipotential nature of the wire. But as my signal rise and fall times were decreasing with scaling, my MOS is becoming more and more efficient. It is a wire delay that is now, which was earlier negligible in comparison to MOS delay, now becomes less than the MOS delay. So now the total delay is dominated by the wire delay or the interconnection delay. So real wires, they are not ideal. Real wires are not ideal. They have parasitic. And why are they not ideal? There is a reason for that. Because they have a parasitic properties attached to them. And what are these parasitic properties? They have a capacitance attached to them. They have a resistance attached to them. They have an inductance attached to them. Because of the nature the IC is fabricated, I have every wire laid on a piece of dielectric, silicon dioxide, field oxide. And beneath it will be a conducting layer. It will have a parasitic capacitance. It's like forming a parallel plate capacitor. Similarly, I cannot assume now that my doping densities are such that resistance is negligible. There may be long length wires, especially, they have a sizable resistances. Shorter wires, we can say, okay, it's not a problem. But in long length wires, we cannot ignore the resistance. And there is an inductive effect also coming to picture at high frequencies. Inductive effect. What is inductive? How do you understand inductance? How do you understand inductance? Impedance is omega L. What does this information tell you? That impedance goes on increasing with frequency. So now your impedance is not frequency independent. Earlier it is only R. R is independent of frequency. Impedance, if you look at the complex impedance, it is independent of frequency if it is only R. But the moment there is an inductive effect, the impedance goes on increasing with frequency. And when the capacitive effect also comes into picture, now impedance becomes a combination of omega. Because capacitive impedance will be reducing with frequency and inductive impedance will be increasing with frequency. So now it is a kind of a RLC circuit that you need to analyze. That is why a transmission line model is required, where you take all the effects into account and impedance is a complex function of frequency. Then I cannot use very simple methods where I use only R or RC to understand the charging and discharging of my receiving end. No, it is not that simple. We have to actually go for the analysis. And here the entire high frequency analysis is required, which leads to the, if you do a very good design of a transmission line, you need to look at the S parameters. Radio frequency, RF design, we call it as a RF design where you work at a very high frequencies and we are actually working with the S parameters. Okay, we are looking at the S parameters. So now, how do we do? How the wires are now becoming a problem for us. How to understand the wires so that we can take care, we can design them effectively, and get the desired results, whatever we want. How do we actually control the wire delays, and how do we actually design the effective wires or interconnections? Okay, so now as this is the slide that I already discussed, so now let us see. Again, you can see there are two categories, on-chip and off-chip. So on-chip wires, they are mostly within the same chip. Shorter length wires, they are roughly have only resistive or a capacitive behavior. Longer length wires, they need to discuss with RLC implementation. Whereas if you look at the off-chip wires, they are roughly, again a transmission line modeling is required. So my discussion will be more into the on-chip side. We will not be looking at the off-chip. Off-chip means the lines which we have on the PCB. Printed circuit board where you are putting say many ICs together and then interconnecting them through a interconnection. You draw lines, connecting lines, conducting lines on a PCB. Have you ever done a PCB design? PCB design? So you all know how to lay out the connections. So that golden strip that you look at that. Okay, everybody knows that. So I'm not looking at that. My discussion will be more into the off-chip wires. So now on-chip wires, very easy. Shorter length wire, we don't worry. Shorter length wires, we don't worry. Very, very easy. It's mostly, I can model them as a lumped capacitance. Even the resistance, I'm not so concerned about, because shorter length means very, very negligible resistance. I can treat them like a lumped capacitor. So their capacitive load will be added to the external load and total load increases. So when it is driven by a conductor, say PMOS or NMOS, my total time constant would be increasing because of this parasitic loading of the wire coming into picture and adding to the external load and adding to the parasitic capacitances. So normally on-chip wires, they are either shorter length or a longer length. If it is a shorter length, it's usually modeled as a lumped capacitance. If it is a moderate length, then we have to take distributed modeling into account. Distributed effect. That means different parts of the wire are at different potentials. There's a voltage drop across the length of the wire. So distributed nature has to be taken care of. And here you all have done that. Here we normally go for RC modeling, of which a very good example is a RC ladder network. A very good example is RC. Have you done RC ladder network analysis? RC ladder? Goa campus?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and we can easily apply the Helmholtz delay formula to calculate the delay expression. Delay from say point A to point B of the two ends of the wire. So very, very simple. If you want to take a moderate length wire, model it or cut it into various end sections. Every section can be modeled like a RC network. And then analyze it and get the delay. You can use Helmholtz delay formula over here very easily. Okay, but usually when you work at a high frequency, then the resistance, as I said, becomes frequency dependent. And a very good property that we all should know, which makes it frequency dependent, is skin effect. Skin effect. What is skin effect? That at very high frequencies, normally at low frequencies, the current flows through the entire cross section of the wire. Entire cross section. But At high frequencies, the current flows only near the periphery of the wire. That means in between the center, there is no current. This is known as the skin effect. Okay? And when is the onset of skin effect has taken place? How do we know? At which frequency the skin effect has taken place? So it is a gradual process. But then we define one point where we say, okay, now the skin effect has come into picture. Just like we have a VT threshold, okay. Below VT, no conduction. Above VT, a very high conduction, where we actually know that even below VT, there is a current. There's a sub-threshold current. So it's not a complete on and off kind of a situation. Same thing here. Skin effect gradually occurs as you go on increasing the frequency, but we define one point where we say, okay, now skin effect has taken care of, has come into picture. And we call, we call that at that frequency, we get the skin depth. And what is that skin depth? How do we understand the skin depth? Where is my... yes, skin depth, we represent it by delta. We represent it as defined as a depth where the current falls off to 1 by eth value of its nominal value. 1 by eth value of its nominal value. That is, this is my conductor. That means current will be only flowing near the periphery. So as you start moving from here to here, the current magnitude goes on reducing. The current magnitude goes on reducing. So at this point somewhere here, the current magnitude becomes 1 by eth of its total value. So this depth is known as the delta value or the skin depth. And this phenomenon only happens at high frequencies. It only happens at high frequencies. Okay? And this depth is known as the skin depth. And how do we understand onset? At what frequency? Resistance. So naturally now R, which is earlier independent of F, now it is a function of F. Now it is a function of F. Earlier, how do I understand my R? It is simply rho L by A. Nowhere F is coming. Nowhere F is coming. Where A is your area of cross-section. Area of cross-section, this is the length. This is the length. Okay? So it is only H plus W. Sorry, it should be the length and this must be W. This is a mistake. It should be length. No. You have to have a three-dimensional structure. So there is a length, width and height. So length is L and width and height, they form the area of cross-section. They form the area of cross-section. We all know that. So now, how do we represent R when it becomes a function of frequency? Now it takes a different expression where this F plays a major role. Where mu P is the permeability of the surrounding dielectric, in which the embedded the interconnect is running. Okay, permeability of the dielectric. So it becomes R becomes a function of frequency, the permeability of the dielectric medium, and the area of cross-section. So this is how we compute the resistance at high frequencies. So at what frequency we assume that the skin effect has taken place. So where we say, as very, very clearly written, defined, is a definition of this onset of the skin effect, where the skin depth is equal to half the largest dimension of the conductor. When this delta becomes equal to half the largest dimension, whichever is the largest dimension, W or H. We are not talking about the length. Half the largest dimension of W and H, we say, okay, when this happens, that F is my frequency at which we can say the skin effect has come into picture. And based on that, people, they have done the analysis, and that frequency is defined by this expression 4 into rho divide by pi mu and the maximum of whatever W and H you have whole square. So what happens when you have, so what happens at high frequencies, R goes on increasing. Okay, how does it affect your signal? How does it affect your signal transmission? R goes on increasing. More R means more attenuation. More R means signal energy is starting from one end, but is never reaching the other end. It is never reaching the other end because of attenuation happening. So my receiver is not getting a signal. My receiver, so when there is no transmission happening, even if I am sending an energy, there is no point. There is no data transmission at all. I need to now redesign my wires. So that signal does reach the receiver. So how to ensure that signal reaches the receiver? For this I have to do the entire analysis. Which analysis? Now I need to know what kind of analysis will be required over here. Should I go for transmission line modeling? Should I go for RC modeling? Should I go for only C modeling? Because it is not appropriate for me that for every case I start doing a transmission line modeling, because that is time consuming. So as a designer, I should have that ability to recognize how to simplify my problem. In what conditions I can apply approximations, and still it will not affect my design quality. I will be able to get my results okay, clear. So under what condition I can assume my interconnect, I can model my interconnect as only C, as only RC, or only RL, or only LC, or RLC. Because if you are able to do that, half of the time your problem would be greatly simplified. Only for few cases you will be applying RLC model. That's a transmission line model. So some thumb rules are there. That okay, now under this condition, go for this kind of a model. Some thumb rules are there. So what are the, let me see if I have that. What are the approximations that we have? I think I do not have that slide. It is there. It is there. Let us understand. It is there. So my wires can be modeled like a simple equipotential region. Very short wires usually you go for that. We treat them as an ideal wire. Or lumped capacitive loads, lumped resistive loads, lumped inductive loads, or LC, or RC, or RLC also. So some thumb rules are there. Short signal lines, use them as lumped capacitors. Okay. On-chip power lines usually shorter in length, lumped resistors. Off-chip power lines, and they are short, high impedance sections, they are modeled as lumped inductors. There are certain thumb rules which you can apply in every case. A short wire normally modeled as a lumped capacitor. Similarly, if the time required to traverse a wire is short compared to the rise time of the fastest signal, use it as a lumped capacitive lines. Under this condition, model it like a lumped capacitor. Similarly, if there is no DC current through the wire, then both inductive resistive elements can be ignored. So there are certain thumb rules which you can follow for attacking a problem. Similarly, lumped resistive lines, yes. Lumped inductive lines, okay, this we will discuss. I think I have skipped many slides and come to this earlier. So before I come to actually transmission line modeling, so two things that I need to understand: how to estimate the R and how to estimate the C. Before we come to the modeling of the wires. So I think we all know how to estimate R. Time is over. Okay. I'm sorry. How much time is over? 10 minutes. Okay. Should have informed me. Anybody can inform me. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Goa campus and Pilani campus. So first assignment is given to you. Kindly stick to the deadlines as far as possible so that you can get more time for the second assignment. Okay? Any problem that you have, kindly talk to me through email, mostly emails. If it is very urgent, talk to me on phone also. Okay? Okay, I have certain TAs who are working with me. Kindly contact. They are in interview, so once they finish, they can inform. I speak too loud. Space your ears.